Kings Island is known for its rides and attractions. But did you know on the 364-acre property, there is also a cemetery? Hello, everyone. Alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.
Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans, because that's who we are, and that's who we care about. So, yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because this is park related, but it's not directly park related, but it's certainly part of the history of the property. You can see the cemetery as you drive in. It's near, where the North Poles are, which when I remember always growing up, it was always like the far end of the parking lot. If you go all the way to the end, you'll see these headstones and stuff. Nowadays, you drive past it every time, though.
Right, yeah, as you're coming through the tolls, it's right off to your left. And, it's been there for a long time, since the 1800s.
Yeah. So here's some things some information that we have on it. But we're able to debunk some of it. So in 1970, Lewis W. Woosley, a project manager for CV Masher and Company, I guess, faced the challenge of locating a forgotten cemetery on the future site of Kings Island's parking lot. So I remember seeing that in a Kings Island blog, that it was a lost cemetery. But I always had heard that they knew all about it. And I remember texting you asking about it, and you were like, "Yeah, I mean, I didn't write that blog, So, so
Yeah, and you and I also confirmed, we had conversations with Dennis Spiegel about it, and, everybody knew exactly where it was.
yeah, so but it was so the blog was posted online, and then of course it was linked to on KI Central, and KI Central people are the most eagle-eyed Kings Island fans out there, and somebody posted this, which is an aerial photo of the property from 1960. And if you look right in the middle of your screen, because you should be watching on YouTube right now by looking for Tower Topics on YouTube, you can see where clearly there's a area cut out where they had done their work around the cemetery. So they very much knew about it. And then, as you mentioned, we were just talking to Dennis Spiegel, and he said that they were very well aware of it, and they had a lot of discussions as to how they were going to plan the property around having that cemetery there. So,
Yeah, that made it interesting. But it's known as Dog Street Cemetery. Um, it had been neglected, before the park was built. It had been neglected since, 1890 for the most part. But, it's been there. Again, it dates back to the 1800s. The earliest recorded burial was in 1803, the last in 1869. And it contains the graves of several individuals, including Peter Montfort. He was a Revolutionary War veteran.
yeah, and so again, we're at this point we're not certain how many of the gravestones were overgrown or lost or whatever, but clearly it's been restored, and I think we believe that it's actually maintained by Kings Island at this point. But so there were a total of 69 graves there. They
Yes.
were, and according to the lore, well, the Kings Island blog, there were one or two that were still standing. But at this point, I don't know if it's necessarily true. But with that being said,
Well, there were a lot of them still standing when I did an episode with Ghost Hunters. We went out there as part of that episode, and there was a handful of them that were up. More than one or two. One of the interesting things, though, was we were about 10 feet from one of them, and as we were just out there chatting, it kind of fell back, just out of nowhere. That was a little bit creepy. And then we came back out a few days later to wrap up the episode because they wanted to come back and talk about Missouri Jane, who you and I will talk about in a few minutes here. It was back up, so we don't know who went out there and put it back up or what happened there, but that was a little bit eerie with it. But yeah, I mean, you look at it and just, the very historical, with the dates that are on those, the 1800s. I mentioned Missouri Jane. She was Missouri Jane Galliner. She reportedly drowned near the cemetery in 1846, and is said to haunt the area. So if you've heard the story about the little girl in the blue dress at Kings Island, that's who we're referencing here.
Yeah. So the story of her drowning near the park, I've always heard that in terms of like being a ghost story, that she drowned in what became the reservoir, where for Whitewater Canyon. That's almost certainly not true. I don't think that there's anything historically that says that she drowned. If you look at the dates and her age, it's very likely that she died as a result of the cholera epidemic at the time in the Cincinnati area. I'd be willing to bet dollars to donuts that that's what happened. But nonetheless, there's all those ghost stories about the girl in the little blue dress, and you can see her from the train and stuff like that. But
Well, let me ask you this, Ryan. You've heard the story?
mm,
Do you believe that there are ghosts and that there is a little girl in the blue dress?
uh, if you're asking if I believe in ghosts in general, I'm kind of agnostic with that in terms of I don't know what I don't know. I don't have a strong conviction as to yes, there are ghosts or no, they're not. But as far as the girl in the little blue dress at Kings Island, I feel like somebody saw something one day and then it was just groupthink from there where everybody thought they saw it for the next 45 years or whatever. So I don't.
Well, you know what? I have an interesting thing about that. Okay, now I heard those ghost stories
Mhm.
in the 1980s when I was riding the racer.
Yeah.
Description, people that claimed they saw her and how they described what she looked like and everything. Years later, and you hear the story from someone else. These people have no connection with each other. There wasn't social media or anything back then, but the stories that they tell and how they depict the girl, is identical. And these people, like I said, don't have any connection to each other. They don't know each other, but they're telling the same, type of story, and where they saw her and what she was wearing, and those kind of things. So that adds a little bit of credibility to it for me. Now, I don't believe in the ghost stories, but there's enough people that I know over the years that have that same description of her. So who knows? Maybe something is out there.
Like I said, I'm not discounting it, but I, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I think that in a lab environment, there would be a lot of stock in that. But at the same time, you can take 100 people from different parts of the world and ask them to describe Mickey Mouse, and they'll describe it the same way, just because Mickey Mouse isn't real. You know.
Yeah. Now, when Ghost Hunters was there, they did not. A lot of the areas around the park where there were supposedly ghost sightings, those got debunked.
Mhm.
The Whitewater Canyon, for instance, was uh, found to be acorns dropping from a tree, which were hitting some of the observation towers and stuff. So they debunked that. They debunked International Street and some other areas of the park. But the one place where they did feel they got some activity was the International Restaurant. And if you watched that episode, you might recall that they played back, sounded like a voice, sounded like a little girl. So that was a little creepy. Made the hair raise on my arm a little bit when they were playing that back to me. But other things, in the International Restaurant, some of the noise that the people would report, pots and pans and things, rattling and that. But that was due to some of the units in there, like the heating and the air conditioning units and that, turning off and on, uh, you know, different times of the day and stuff. So a lot of it was debunked, but they felt there might have been a little bit of activity, and it was coming from a young child, they felt, up in the International Restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that random noises being made would have been done by AC units? Um, Yeah, so the Missouri Jane thing is certainly that's the most widespread ghost story
Mm-hmm.
from Kings Island, but also the one from the International Restaurant that I read online, but I haven't really heard anywhere else. And tell me if you've heard this or not. Is that there was a chef that like there was a chef that like died that haunts it or something? Like, have you heard anything like that? Like I.
Never heard that, and as far as I can recall, there was never any chefs at the park, until the Cedar Fair years, when they hired their first one was Nathan Gushalak was the first one that was hired. So I'd never heard that story, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, I read it online, and I I 100% didn't think that anything about it was true, but I was just curious as you if you had heard the story as well. But so yeah, we were just talking to Dennis Spiegel, and it's for people outside of the industry, it's who's Dennis Spiegel, but for anybody probably listening to this podcast, you're like, that's pretty cool. But we asked him about this, and he said that one of the arrangements when they purchased the property was that the descendants of those people that are laid to rest there get to come in and pay their respects whenever they want without paying for parking. I don't think that the scam of going up saying I'm going to visit the graveyard, let me through, is going to work, because the last person that was laid to rest was 200 years ago. But he said that he was with Kings Island from opening, well, before opening, but let's say 72 to about 74 or so. We just discussed it, so I'm sorry if I got that date wrong, Dennis. But he said that he had never heard of anybody calling into management saying like, hey, there's this person here that wants to visit the cemetery or whatever. But
No, I never ran into that during my 17 years working there either. No one ever said they were there uh, to visit a family member.
yeah, it would be very interesting. It's one of those things where there probably isn't a whole lot of there. It's interesting to us because it's a cemetery in the parking lot of a theme park, so it's a big contrast of death and very, very liveliness. And I'm not going to go down the path of like Halloween Haunt, because I think that's disrespectful to the situation, to be honest with you. But
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of there because there was very common for families to have their own cemeteries on their farms, and that's probably what this is. Um, but the local historical society preserves the history of the ceremony, despite a lot of the gravestones being worn away, as has a tendency to do with the rock headstones.
Mm-hmm.
But efforts to maintain and protect the cemetery ensure that it remains a significant historical site. The cemetery reflects the early American history of the area, tied to the local farms and community of Kings Mills, which was incorporated in 1884. Um, so yeah, it's very interesting. And then, fun fact: there's also one at King's Dominion we found out today.
Yes, there is one there too. So it seemed like wherever they were building parks back then with Taft, that they'd run into a cemetery situation.
Yeah, so this serves as a reminder of the region's past and the importance of preserving historical landmarks amid modern development. And again, that contrast of you know something as dead, shall we say, as a cemetery, with something as alive as a theme park is almost something that's like poetry in motion, if you ask me. So
Yeah.
let's turn it over to the user. So we want to hear what you have to say. Have you ever had a ghost encounter at Kings Island? And if so, tell us about it. If not, do you believe in ghosts? Let us know in the comments below. So I'm not going to try to make some sort of cute transition because, again, I think that's disrespectful. But Don, tell them about the Tower Topics t-shirts.
Well, if you're a fan of the show, and we hope that you are, we have Tower Topic T-shirts available. We have sold, a good number of them, and you can purchase them for $22. That includes shipping. They are a North Carolina blue color, comes in whatever size you may need. And if you're interested in one, just send us a direct message on our X, which is tower_topics. Let us know you're interested. We will send you the Venmo code on how to make that purchase. And then once we have your size and your mailing address and your $22, it just takes a matter of days to get that shipped out to you. And you can become one of the growing number of people who is sporting a Tower Topics t-shirt. And we have seen pictures of Tower Topics t-shirts, not just showing up at Kings Island, but also they're showing up from outside of the country. As recently as this past weekend, one was spotted in Holland, of all places.
We are officially an international operation, Don. Are you proud of yourself?
Very proud.
You should be. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have a Tower Topics T-shirt and you're wearing it, whether you're at the park, you're at a ball game, wherever you are, cutting the grass, whatever it is, take a picture, tag us on X, and we'll certainly share it.
Yeah, we love to see that stuff. All right. Let's move on to the listener questions. All right, the first
All
listener
right.
question. I'll read this because I don't know the answer, but I imagine that you do because it sounds like something you would know. Keith B. from Lexington, Kentucky said, I heard one of the singer dancers in retrospect has a brother playing for the Cincinnati Reds farm system. Do you know who that is and where they're playing? All you, Don.
As a matter of fact, I do. The name of the player is Nicholas Northcutt uh, from the Mason, Ohio area. Was drafted by the Boston Red Sox, acquired by the Reds organization in exchange for Tommy Pham, who was an outfielder. You may recall him, played for the Reds a couple years ago. Nick right now is playing in Double A Chattanooga. Uh, Third baseman, has a lot of power. I think last time I looked, he had 18 home runs earlier in the week, and I wouldn't say he's like one of the top 50 prospects, um, but he does, like I said, he's putting up power numbers in Double A. He is 25 years old, and his sister has been a performer for the past 3 or 4 years at Kings Island. Has appeared in shows in the Fest House, and as mentioned now in retrospect.
Yeah, don't want to say her first name because I feel like that would be a doxing situation, but she sang the national anthem on the 4th of July, I saw on social. So very, very good. Very talented family between baseball and singing and dancing. I wonder.
All right, well, I'll read the next one
All
then.
right, all right.
All right, we got Larry, Moore, Ohio. Can you explain why there is such an inconsistency with the portion sizes at the Kings Island restaurants? One visit, I'm getting 6 wings at the Island Smokehouse, the next 3, then the next 5. So why the inconsistencies, Ryan?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer this question, but I can take a guess. I mean, um, I I don't know if the portions have changed. That's possible. So let's get that out of the way. But honestly, it's there are two things that kind of stick out to me. One is maybe some sort of training issue with whoever you dealt with didn't know how many wings you're supposed to get. I think that's a very likely culprit. The other possibility is that maybe they do it by weight and maybe 3 wings weighs as much as 6. That's my other guess. But do you have any thoughts on this, Don?
Well, I have not had a meal this year yet at the Island Smokehouse, but what I can tell you is from my experience this year using the dining plan is that, and this is over 20 visits, I felt that the portion sizes have been very consistent. Everywhere I've gone. When I go into the brew house, if I get a pub burger, I'm getting the same, portion size with the tater tots. Uh, when I've had meals at Jukebox Diner, same portion size with the fries. I almost want to say too many fries at Jukebox Diner. Uh, you know, when I've gone to Coney Barbecue, mac and cheese and whatever my side is, portion size, very consistent. So I'm not experiencing anything, that's even remotely close to what Larry's experiencing with portion sizes.
Yeah, I mean, there sometimes the presentation is deceiving where something looks more full than it is or whatever, but when it comes down to chicken wings, you either have 3 or you have 5 or whatever, which again, the only workaround to that would be the weight, but I would say maybe it's worth asking. Uh, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I feel like consistency is an issue no matter where you go. Not Kings Island necessarily, not even the theme park industry, but sometimes you get a bunch of fries when you order McDonald's, and sometimes you don't. So I think that there should be a lot more transparency as to what you get. So, but still a very good question, Larry. Thanks for sending it in. All right, I am Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.